So, good morning once again, dear students of class 12. And today, once again, we will continue with the short story that we were doing, To Build a Fire by Jack London. And we had finished with the introduction of the story and also did an analysis of the themes of the story in our first video. And we have also gone through some illustrations and the location of the region which happens to be the setting for this short story by Jack London. Today we will continue from the fourth page of the text in your textbook. So let's get ready for the text. So students, if you remember, we had stopped at the end of page 37 in your textbook, and we were discussing the appearance of the husky or the dog which was trying to follow our protagonist, the man who was planning to trek across the Yukon Valley region to reach his friends who were waiting for him in a camp on the other side of the Yukon Valley. And the dog's description, the way the frozen moisture of its breathing had settled on its fur in a fine powder of frost, and especially where its jowls, muzzle, and eyelashes whitened by its crystalled breath. So we had stopped here. Now let's continue. We move on to page 38. Red beard and moustache were likewise frosted, but more solidly, the deposit taking the form of ice and increasing with every warm, moist breath he exhaled. So, under extreme sub-zero temperatures, we know that it's minus 75 degrees. This is what normally happens when you exhale or when you breathe out. The water vapor which you exhale immediately freezes and crystallizes on your face, around your nostrils, on your mustache. If you are a man and if you have a mustache, if you have a beard, then this is what happens. So that is being described here. You can see that this story has vivid description of each and every aspect of the human being, the dog, and also the surroundings. So a lot of imagery. You have to be very imaginative to understand the descriptions that the author gives of each and everything here in this short story. So, also the man was chewing tobacco, and the muzzle of ice held his lips so rigidly that he was unable to clear his chin when he expelled the juice. The result was that a crystal beard of the color and solidity of amber was increasing its length on his chin. If he fell down, it would shatter itself like glass into brittle fragments. So what the author is trying to say here is that this man, he was chewing tobacco, and the juice of the tobacco, which is generally amber in color, which is a mixture of red and brown, this was actually inside his mouth, and if he tried to spit it out, what would happen? A portion of that juice from his mouth or the spittle would actually immediately freeze on his mouth and beard and mustache if he tried to do that. And that's exactly what is being said. It was already there on his beard, on his mustache, and if he happened to fall down with his face falling first onto the ground, then these crystals would immediately shatter and break up into tiny fragments. But he did not mind the appendage. Appendage means this extra addition to his beard. An extra portion of this deposited frozen, you can say, tobacco juice which was on his beard, he did not mind it. It was the penalty all tobacco chewers paid in that country, and he had been out before in 2 cold snaps. So, this was not the first time that he was trying to do an expedition in extreme cold temperatures. Maybe not here, but elsewhere he had done this before, and so he was accustomed to such things happening to his beard and his mustache, and that is what is being said here. So, they had not been so cold as this, he knew, but by the spirit thermometer at 60 mile, he knew they had been registered at 50 below and at 55. So, 60 mile is a place name in Yukon Valley region. Just as, for example, I can just give you an example. In Siliguri, you generally have an address. I am sure many of you have come across this address. Second mile Sevok Road. Second mile. So it's the measure of distance from the center of the city along Sevok Road up to the second milestone, or the coverage of the distance of 2 miles. So that is actually given as an address. So similarly here in Alaska or here in Canada, this Yukon region, there is a place called 60 mile, and there he had seen or consulted the thermometer, that is the maximum and minimum thermometer. I am sure you have read about the thermometer in geography or physics. So there the temperature he had noted was minus 55 degrees. So, but then now exposed to the cold, he realizes that it is much lower than that. In fact, we know that it is minus 75. So 20 degrees lesser than what the thermometer had shown at 60 mile. He held on through the level stretch of woods for several miles, crossed a wide flat of niggerheads, and dropped down a bank to the frozen bed of a small stream. So this man, he is on his way. So these are the different terrain features that are being described here. So he was walking, he was on foot. We know that he does not have a sledge, and the husky, of course, is maintaining some distance but is following him. This was Henderson Creek. So he had reached the area or the region which was known as Henderson Creek, and he knew he was 10 miles from the Forks. So Forks means a place where the trail divides into two. It forks, or single trail becomes two separate trails and moves in two different directions. He looked at his watch. It was 10 o'clock. So he had started at 9 o'clock, as we already know from the first video, and now it's 10 o'clock. So he has been walking for an hour. He was making 4 miles an hour. Now, normally if a man walks on simple plain ground under normal day temperatures, the average speed of a man walking could be around 8 to 10 kilometers per hour. Now here this man is traversing along difficult terrain in extreme cold temperature, but still he has covered a distance of 4 miles in 1 hour, which is not bad at all. And he calculated that he would arrive at the Fork or at the Forks at 12:30. So 2.5 hours more, and he would be able to cover another 10 miles and he'll be reaching the Forks. He decided to celebrate that event by eating his lunch there. So this is what he has planned, that when he reaches the Forks, say around 12:30, he would take a stopover, a brief stopover. He would stop there and have his lunch. And we already know from the first video what his lunch is. So he's carrying it inside his jacket, biscuits layered with bacon and grease. So that is what he's planning to eat when he reaches the Forks. The dog dropped in again at his heels, with a tail drooping discouragement. So the dog was following at his heels, but the tail of the dog was down, as if it was not very uh, encouraged to go on. It was rather discouraged. It was, as we know from what we had read in the previous page, that the dog was expecting this man to find some kind of shelter from the cold, but this man was going on and on along the wilderness in the open countryside in such extreme temperature. So the dog was finding it very funny, and still it was following the man. So there was this gesture of discouragement. The body language of the dog, you could say, was telling that it was not very happy to follow the man in such adverse situation. As the man swung along the creek bed, the furrow of the old sled trail was plainly visible. So, as he was walking along, he could see that there was this furrow. Furrow means the depression left behind when a sledge moves along the snow. So it digs into the snow, and the plates of the sledge leave some kind of marking behind, just like tires in a vehicle leave behind tire marks if the ground is wet. Similarly, in the snow, somebody had in the past traveled along this area. In fact, many people had traveled along this area using their sledge or sledges, and so the old marking of the sledge trail was visible still. But this man, as we know, is not using a sledge. He is walking. He is trying to cover the distance on foot. But a dozen inches of snow covered the marks of the last runners. What are the runners? These are the steel plates under the sledge which help the sledge to slide along across the snow. So these are called the runners. Instead of wheels, the sledge normally has two runners on two sides. In a month, no man had come up or down that silent creek. The man held steadily on. He was not much given to thinking, and just then, particularly, he had nothing to think about save that he would eat lunch at the Fox, and that at 6 o'clock he would be in camp with the boys. So, this is his planning. 12:30 he will reach the Fox and he will have his lunch. He will be stopping there for a few minutes. He'll finish his food and then again continue on his way. And by 6 o'clock in the evening, he will be reaching his friends. So that is what he is thinking. Now, like they say, man proposes and God disposes. Let's see what happens in the long run with this man. There was nobody to talk to, and had there been, speech would have been impossible because of the ice muzzle on his mouth. He was all by himself. There was no one else with him. And even if there would have been someone with him, he wouldn't have possibly been able to speak to that person because the area around his mouth was already covered with frozen ice. So he continued monotonously to chew tobacco and to increase the length of his amber beard. So the more he chewed tobacco, the more of that tobacco juice came out from the corner of his mouth, or with the breath that he exhaled, and started freezing around his beard and his mouth area, and it became bigger and bigger and bigger. Once in a while, the thought reiterated itself that it was very cold and that he had never experienced such cold. As he walked along, he rubbed his cheekbones and nose. So we have come to the end of page 38, and here there is an illustration. Let's see. Here you can see the man and the husky. The husky, this is just an artist's illustration. It's not a real photograph, just to give you an idea. And you can see the spruce trees and the entire ground which is covered with snow. So what he is trying to do? He rubbed his cheekbones and nose with the back of his mittened hand. So his hand is inside the mittens, and with the back of his mittened hand, he tried to rub his cheekbones because he was feeling numb in his face, and that's why he decided to rub and restore some amount of blood circulation in his cheeks. He did this automatically, now and again changing hands, but rub as he would, the instant he stopped, his cheekbones went numb, and the following instant, the end of his nose went numb. So it was so cold that while he was rubbing it, it was okay. The moment he stopped, it would be numb again. So not only his cheeks, but also the tip of his nose. He was sure to frost his cheeks. He knew that, and experienced a pang of regret that he had not devised a nose strap of the sort Bud wore in cold snaps. So he had a friend called Bud, and he had seen Bud wearing a nose strap. Well, that is a device which is kind of a mask. Nowadays, whenever we go out, we have to put on the mask. So, in extreme cold temperatures, the nose and mouth and the sides, two sides of the mouth, down along the cheeks, is covered with this kind of a nose strap. So he was regretting that he had not made one for himself. He could have made it out of a piece of woolen cloth or something, so that he could give more protection to his cheeks, because he was sure that his cheeks were freezing in the cold. So such a strap passed across the cheeks as well and saved them. But it didn't matter much after all. What were frosted cheeks? A bit painful? That was all. They were never serious. So this man is slighting off. One moment he's regretting, and next moment he's slighting it off. He's saying, doesn't matter. It will be paining me a little bit in my cheeks, but afterwards it'll be fine. And once I reach my friends by evening 6 o'clock, I will get the fire there, and I'll get the supper there, and the warmth and the cozy feeling inside the log cabin or the camp. I have already shown you in the previous video a kind of log cabin that you get to see in this region. So he is thinking about the possibility of managing it, and he says it doesn't really matter much. Empty as the man's mind was of thoughts, he was keenly observant, and he noticed the changes. He noticed the changes in the creek, the curves and bends and timber jams. What are timber jams? Areas in the river. Of course, the river is frozen. The Yukon River is completely frozen in winter. And there are certain areas where the timber or the logs of wood that have floated down, that have been intentionally, purposely put into the river water during the warm season to cause them to float downstream, they have jammed up in certain places. Winter has come and it's completely frozen, so it will be long before the ice starts melting, and then the logs will be recovered from the river water. So there are certain areas where the timber is jammed up, so that's called the timber jam. And always he sharply noted where he placed his feet. Now he has to be careful when you are walking along snow-covered ground. There are many treacherous areas where the snow could be very thin, and there could be a hollow underneath, and that hollow could be filled with ice cold water. So only the upper surface and is frozen, and you step on it and you break through the snow and ice, and you go directly into the water. And in such extreme temperatures, the moment you are drenched, your body will be completely frozen into ice. So you have to be very, very cautious, and that is what this man was trying to do. Once coming around a bend, he shied abruptly like a startled horse, curved away from the place where he had been walking, and retreated several paces back along the trail. The creek, he knew, was frozen clear to the bottom. No creek could contain water in that Arctic winter. Now, this area is actually not in the Arctic Circle area. This part of Canada falls under taiga. It's not exactly the tundra or the tundra region, it's the taiga, which is just below the tundra region. But then, winter is really, really awful in this area, and that's the reason why Arctic winter is being mentioned. So, once what happened? He went along for some time and then he realized he was walking on thin sheet of ice. So he carefully retraced his footsteps and came back a few paces along the trail to take an alternative roundabout route so that he did not simply break the ice and go inside the water. He was sure that the water would not be there. He was sure that the water has completely frozen, but still, you never know. And that is what he was trying to do for his own safety. So, but he knew also that there were springs that bubbled out from the hillsides and ran along under the snow and on top the ice of the creek. He knew that the coldest snaps never froze these springs, and he knew likewise their danger. So, why was he worried? There are sometimes springs of water, hot springs underneath the ice. So, there the layer of ice is not very thick, and because of the hot stream, the ice layer is not thick, and naturally, therefore, you can break through the ice and you can fall into the water. But when there is nothing wrong when you fall inside the water, but the moment you pull yourself out of the hole, you realize that your legs are frozen, your lower body is completely frozen. So, this is the danger. So, this is the danger. These were like traps. So, they were like traps. They hid pools of water under the snow that might be 3 inches deep or 3 feet. Sometimes a skin of ice, half an inch thick, covered them, and in turn was covered by the snow. Sometimes there were alternate layers of water and ice skin, so that when one broke through, he kept on breaking through for a while, sometimes wetting himself to the waist. So there could be 3-4 layers of thin layers of ice with water in between. So you once you break through the topmost layer, you keep on breaking through for several more layers until you reach lots of water underneath, and your body is half sunk in that hole up to the waist, and then the real trouble starts because you are soaked, and then you pull yourself out of that water and realize that your lower body almost instantaneously is frozen rock hard. And if you are alone, there's nobody to help you, then you are in deep trouble. You are likely to freeze to death because you are likely to undergo hypothermia, a condition where the body temperature falls below the limit which up to which a person can possibly survive. So this situation needs to be avoided. This man knew about it to some extent. The only mistake that he had made is that he was traveling alone. He shouldn't have traveled alone. He should have had another companion, another human being with him, so that if anything happened to him, somebody else would be there to rescue him or help him out. And likewise, vice versa. But he did not do that. He thought he was too confident, overconfident. So here it is once again, as I told you in the first video, man versus nature. And nature can at times be really very brutal, and we human beings then are just mere victims in the hands of nature. No matter how advanced we are in technology, how advanced we are in our developments, we are still helpless in the hands of nature. So this is something which the man did not really consider when he started his journey at 9 o'clock in the morning. That was why he had shied in such panic. So we have reached towards the end of page 39. That was why he had shied in such panic. He had felt the ice, there is this ice, the word missing here, give under his feet and heard the crackle of a snow hidden ice skin. And to get his feet wet in such a temperature meant trouble and danger. At the very least, it meant delay, for he would be forced to stop and build a fire, and under its protection to bare his feet while he dried his socks and moccasins. Moccasins are his shoes. So, if he falls into the pool and if he pulls himself out, he has to remove his shoes, he has to dry his feet, dry his socks, and dry his shoes, make a fire for that, and then wear them again, and then start walking again. So it'll take a lot of time, and it will also delay his journey. He stood and studied the creek bed and its banks, and decided that the flow of water came from the right. He reflected a while, rubbing his nose and cheeks, and then skirted to the left, stepping gingerly and testing the footing for each step. One clear of the danger, he took a fresh chew of tobacco and swung along at his 4-mile gait. So, this is how carefully he covered that area, crossed that area, and once again continued at a speed of 4 miles per hour, started walking once again. So we have finished page 39, moved on to page 40. In the course of the next 2 hours, he came upon several similar traps. So several similar areas with such traps. He avoided them, and avoided them. Usually the snow above the hidden pools had a sunken, candid appearance that advertised the danger. Once again, so there were certain signs or symptoms in the snow which this man was experienced about, and he knew that if he stepped there, he could go through the snow into the pool underneath. So he avoided those areas and he carefully moved along. Now what is happening is that he's not able to maintain his speed of 4 miles an hour every time because of these places, and he has to carefully cover these places, cross these places, go in a roundabout manner, leave the trail for a while. So all these things are actually causing him to lose time, and we know that in extreme cold and in such a situation, daylight being very less and the length of the day being very short, he cannot afford to waste so much of time, yet it is happening, he can't help it. So once again, however, he had a close call, and once suspecting danger, he compelled the dog to go on in front. So what did he do? He made the dog go forward. If anything happens, it will happen to the dog. See how inhuman he is. He is testing it out with the dog first. The dog did not want to go. Now animals, they have their instinct. The dog is a husky and it can understand that going ahead could be dangerous. It hung back until the man shoved it forward, and then it went quickly across the white unbroken surface. Suddenly it broke through, floundered to one side and got away to firmer footing. So the dog virtually crossed the area, but then the surface of the thin ice actually broke under its legs. Anyhow, the dog managed to escape from being drowned in the water underneath, or from falling into the water underneath. It had wet its 4 feet and legs, and almost immediately the water that clung to it turned to ice. It made quick efforts to lick the ice off its legs, then dropped down in the snow and began to bite out the ice that had formed between the toes. Now the dog instinctively does this. The moment its paws are wet, they freeze, and the dog immediately tries to remove the frozen ice from its paws. This was a matter of instinct. To permit the ice to remain would mean sore feet. It did not know this. Of course, the dog did not know it. It merely obeyed the mysterious prompting that arose from the deep crypts of its being. So it's the animal instinct. The animal knows that it has to remove it. Why it has to remove it? What will happen if it does not remove it? The animal does not know. Its instinct tells it to remove it, and so it starts biting off the ice. But the man knew, having achieved a judgment on the subject, and he removed the mitten from his right hand and helped tear out the ice particles. He did not expose his fingers more than a minute and was astonished at the swift numbness that smote them. So the man was trying to help the dog now. What he did was he removed his mitten. Mitten is a glove, and he tried to remove the snow and ice from the toes of the dog. But at the same time, he realized that the cold, severe cold, had actually attacked his exposed fingers and had turned them completely numb. And it was painful. It certainly was cold. He pulled on the mitten hastily and beat the hand savagely across his chest, beating his hand across his own chest to resume the blood circulation in his fingers so that they feel warm once again. At 12 o'clock, the day was at its brightest, yet the sun was too far south on its winter journey to clear the horizon. The bulge of the earth intervened between it and Henderson Creek, where the man walked under a clear sky at noon and cast no shadow. So at noon, the sun is directly overhead, and so there was no shadow on the ground. At 12:30 to the minute, he arrived at the forks of the creek. So, as expected, he had managed to arrive at the forks, and the time was 12:30. To the minute, at the very minute of 12:30, he arrived at the fork. Now, he was pleased at the speed he had made. If he kept it up, he would certainly be with the boys by 6. He unbuttoned his jacket and shirt and drew forth his lunch. So, as he had decided that he would have lunch once he reached the forks, this is what he was going to do now. The action consumed no more than a quarter of a minute. Yet in that brief moment, the numbness laid hold of the exposed fingers. He did not put the mitten on, but instead struck the fingers a dozen sharp smashes against his leg. Then he sat down on a snow-covered log to eat. The sting. So you can see this is the man, and he is trying to make a fire. This scene actually comes up a little later in the story, but this illustration is here for you to just make you understand how severe it was. He's trying to make a fire under a spruce tree, and you can see that he has removed his mittens, or rather, yes, the two mittens are lying beside him, and the man is trying to make a fire. Now his hands are exposed, his fingers are exposed. Now, without removing the mittens, he cannot possibly arrange the firewood, he cannot possibly ignite the flame. And then disaster strikes, because when he lights the fire under the spruce tree, the tree was covered with snow. A heavy load of snow falls on the fire and also on him, and completely douses off the flames and freezes him. So anyway, so he followed up upon the striking of his fingers against his leg, seized so quickly that he was startled. So what was he trying to do? He was trying to bring back sensation in his fingers, and he was hitting his fingers, his hands across his leg, and hoping that circulation would restore, but it was not happening. He was really shocked to realize that the moment he was stopping, the circulation was also stopping. He had had no chance to take a bite of biscuit. He struck the fingers repeatedly and returned them to the mitten, baring the other hand for the purpose of eating. He tried to take a mouthful, but the ice muzzle prevented. So you see, neither is he able to take out his hand from the mittens, nor is he able to eat, because his mouth is totally covered with frozen crystals of ice. So how will he eat? First of all, exposing his fingers is turning them numb. It's so cold. And secondly, his mouth area is totally covered with crystallized ice and he cannot open his mouth. So this is the problem the man is facing. He had forgotten to build a fire and thaw out. He chuckled at his foolishness. And he chuckled. As he chuckled, he noted the numbness creeping into the exposed fingers. So he realizes that he has to make the fire. So that is the illustration all about. He will make a fire first and then he will try to have his food. Let's see what happens. Also, he noted that the stinging which had first come to his toes when he sat down was already passing away. He wondered whether the toes were warm or numb. He moved them inside the moccasins and decided they were numb. So even his feet, his toes have become icy cold. He pulled the mitten on hurriedly and stood up. He was a bit frightened. He stamped up and down until the stinging returned into the feet. It certainly was cold, was his thought. That man from Sulphur Creek had spoken the truth. Somebody whom he had met at a place called Sulphur Creek, he had warned him. That man refers to a resident of Sulphur Creek who has better knowledge of this region. And he had told him, warned him, but this man, our protagonist, he had not listened then. But now he is realizing that the man from the Sulphur Creek had spoken the truth when telling how cold it sometimes got in the country. In the country means in the countryside, that is the rural, you can say, area or the area which he is trying to travel across. And he had laughed at him at the time. So he had laughed it off. That showed one must not be too sure of things. There was no mistake about it. It was cold. You can see was in italics because there is a stress on this word. He strode up and down, stamping his feet and threshing his arms, until reassured by the returning warmth. Then he got out matches and proceeded to make a fire. From the undergrowth where the high water of the previous spring had lodged a supply of seasoned twigs, he got firewood. So he managed to get together a few twigs, for making fire. He required firewood, so he managed to get some in the snow. Working carefully from a small beginning, he soon had a roaring fire over which he thawed the ice from his face and in the protection of which he ate his biscuits. So soon the fire was burning and he was able to melt away the ice deposits from his beard and mouth and his fingers also. He could warm his toes also, he could warm, and he could take out the biscuits and he could eat his lunch. For the moment, the cold of space was outwitted. The dog took satisfaction in the fire, stretching out close enough for warmth and far enough away to escape being singed. Singed means burnt. So the dog tried to lie down, stretch out in front of the fire as close as possible, but maintaining that safety of a distance which would prevent it from being burnt. When the man had finished, he filled his pipe and took his comfortable time over a smoke. So after finishing his lunch, this man, he decides to smoke his pipe. Then he pulled on his mittens, settled his ear flaps on his cap firmly about his ears, and took the creek trail up the left fork. So finally he started off once again, made a fire, had his lunch, smoked his pipe, and now on his way again. He has taken the fork on the left. He has taken the trail which leads from the fork to the left. The dog was disappointed and yearned back toward the fire. Now the dog did not like to leave the fire and go away again into the cold. But then the man did not know cold. Possibly all the generations of his ancestry had been ignorant of cold, of real cold, of cold 107 degrees below freezing point. So what do you make of this? 107 degrees. When he had started off at 9 o'clock in the morning, The area which he was facing was having minus 75 degrees temperature, and now halfway through this area where he has reached, the temperature is now 107 degrees below freezing point. And this man, this foolish man, as if for generations, as if from his ancestral you can say bearing, there is no sensation of cold at all. There is no realization of the fact that it's terribly cold. Man goes on his way, and the dog is disappointed. The dog's instinct says, don't go any further, but the man is moving, and so the dog must follow. But the dog knew. So we have come to the end of page 41, but the dog knew. So we will stop here for the day, and we will continue with the story once again in our next video, the third video after this. So end of page 41. The man did not seem to understand the importance of not going ahead in the cold like this, but the dog seemed to know about it, all about it, because of its instinct. So we stop here on page 41. I hope I have been able to make you understand, and I hope you have understood the text so far. Thank you very much.